Hey everybody, we are here at the clubhouse on Highland Avenue and we're getting ready to show this beautiful movie and you're about to see it in live stream. It is called Mission Joy and I am thankful that we're able to play it for you. We didn't think we were going to be able to show it virtually, but we're going to be able to do that and I'm so excited for you joining. Make sure you invite somebody to join. All right, let's do this.
Am I?
No, it's fine.
Huh?
Put it on the chair.
Do you want
Just
to if
drop
you
it there.
sit back a bit?
Very good.
Over there. Yeah, father over there. Yeah.
Is it going to be okay with your father?
Thank you. Daddy, we keep
Just like that.
Okay, all right. Here we go. Okay.
The Tibetan people are being exterminated. Their culture and religion are being stamped out.
Since he was 4 years old, the Dalai Lama was trained to lead his people, but lost control of his country to the Chinese government and has led his people from exile for decades.
Thank you, dearie.
Amid tear gas and police dogs, Desmond Tutu led a people against apartheid.
The idea of freedom has not yet come to this last remaining bastion of white supremacy in Africa.
When people decide to be free, absolutely nothing is going to stop them from becoming free.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa came to meet the Dalai Lama. An historic meeting of men whose lifelong quests for justice and self-determination for their people garnered each the Nobel Prize for Peace.
How are you doing, everyone? Are we ready?
Button, yeah.
Are we good? Okay, great. His Holiness.
Listen, act like a holy man.
Siya bingelela,
is the purpose of your visit, sir?
Just enjoy our friendship and maybe talk about joy. This is my doctor.
I was actually with my dad when he and the Dalai Lama first met at a museum in, of all places, Newark, New Jersey.
It's a very great honor to meet His Holiness and to know that one is in the presence of a very great spiritual leader.
I admire, you see, his work, all those many years. You see, I'm very much dedicated for welfare of community, especially, you see, less privileged people or people who suffer.
I don't think you could find two people on the planet who are more different than the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, or Arch, as his friends call him. One's from Africa, one's from Asia, one's a Buddhist, one's a Christian. One grew up in absolute poverty. The other grew up in a 1,000-room palace. But immediately they recognized each other as what they called their mischievous spiritual brother.
I've sometimes said to him, the cameras are on us. You know the word mischievous. You are mischievous, aren't you?
I consider that person also, you see, mischievous person. So meeting two mischievous person, wonderful.
Honestly, the energy between them is 8-year-old boy.
Behind him, I try to like that.
I look at them and I think, I am so glad that I was not your 3rd grade teacher, because they're so playful, so much fun and teasing.
Unfortunately, that person is Christian.
Unfortunately, he's a Buddhist.
At the beginning of the dialogue, I was like, who the hell am I to try to sit down with these two incredible spiritual leaders and try to distill their wisdom? But as Arch says, sometimes you're the one in the room, and it doesn't matter what your strengths or your limitations are, you have to just show up and let what wants to happen happen.
I have worked with this young man since when?
At least a decade.
I think that Doug sees my dad as an other father, and my dad sees Doug as, another of his beloved children.
Nothing will stop us, for we are moving to freedom. We are moving.
I first learned about Archbishop Tutu when I was an undergraduate in college. It was a time when students from around the world were protesting apartheid. Arch was a hero to us.
It is my great honor to introduce a man of courage, Bishop Desmond Tutu.
At that time, he traveled the world speaking out against the white South African government. And on college campuses across the US, he was treated as something like a rock star.
In a situation of injustice and oppression, there can be no neutrality. You have to take sides. You have to say, am I on the side of justice or am I on the side of injustice?
I was so inspired. I wondered, how does a man like this, how does he live day to day, and what can I learn from that? When I ended up in publishing, working with visionaries, Arch was at the top of my list. Before we begin, I want to thank Jimpa, who worked very hard with me on the questions, and any of the good questions are his, any of the bad questions are mine.
Then maybe good answer from him, bad answer from me.
So when we speak about Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and
Jimpa is the longtime translator for the Dalai Lama. He was a Buddhist monk who left monastic life, went to Cambridge and got a PhD, and is one of the most extraordinary translators and interpreters of Tibetan text.
I had become the interpreter for His Holiness, which meant my service was not so much to the Tibetan community, my service was to His Holiness, to the world.
I also want to ask us to just forget about the cameras. This is not live. If you fall asleep, that's fine. One time, we were at Arch's office, and the chairman of the Dalai Lama Foundation turned to me and said, "What do you think about Arch and the Dalai Lama doing a book together?" I said, "Wow, that would be amazing. Like, what would it be about?" And we both paused for a second, and we looked at each other and we said, "Joy." If anyone could help us live with more joy in the face of the pain in our lives and the pain in our world, it was these two men. It's clear that laughter is central to the way that you are in the world. Your spiritual practice hasn't made you somber and serious. It's made you more joyful. So how can people cultivate that sense of joy as a way of being, not just a feeling?
Yes, it is very true. Although you say my English very, very limited, very tiny. So you see, sometimes I do not know the exact meaning of the word. I think when I use the word joy, in the sense, satisfaction,
yes,
which is the meaningful life and the ultimate source of a meaningful life is within our own self.
Yes. In fact, when you say you are pursuing happiness, you are not going to find it. It's very elusive.
That's right, yes. You see, usually everybody seeks happiness, joyfulness, but from outside, from money, from power, from big car, from big house. Ultimate source of happy life, even physical health, inside, not outside. So now here, you, Tutu, my long time my friend, see, you have, I think, great potential.
Potential?
Great potential, yes. I mean, great potential is to create more happier humanity. Even you see, just look, you see your face, you're always laughing, always joyful. That itself, very positive message.
But let me ask you.
Oh.
You've been in exile 50 what years?
56.
56. From a country that you love more than anything else. Why are you not morose?
Morose, correct.
Sad, sad.
Oh. Some people call Tibet Shangri-La. The reality is something different and much more difficult.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama was born to an ordinary farmer's family. In fact, his parents were illiterate. 13th Dalai Lama passed away. The Tibetan succession system for choosing the next Dalai Lama relies on this Buddhist concept of reincarnation. There is a formal recognition of a child at a very young age as the continuity of the Dalai Lama, and he was recognized at the age of 2. One of the method as part of the process involves identifying what objects belonging to the predecessor, which are mixed with other objects as well. He passed the test with flying colors. Once he was formally recognized, he was brought to Lhasa, to central Tibet, the Potala Palace.
When I was young,
We never saw my mother's sort of angry face, very, very kind. But I remained separate from my mother.
That meant the day-to-day upbringing was handled by monks, tutors, and attendants. His Holiness, in some of his books, writes of loneliness. His curiosity was piqued by science. He had a fascination for mechanical things. From the Potala Palace, he would see these shepherds' kids, coming home, bringing home their goats and other animals, singing freely and whistling with a sense of abandon. The expectation, aspiration, and hopes of the entire Tibetan people was placed upon, I would say unfairly, upon the shoulders of this young kid.
Like age 16, I lost my freedom because the people asked me to take political responsibility. They insist because Chinese military already entered eastern part of Tibet.
Communist China claims that Tibet has been historically part of China, and it's reclaiming what it sees as its lost territory. And by 1951, they had completely taken over the entire country. Up until 1959, the Dalai Lama really made efforts to try to find a political solution to the arrangement of China's presence in Tibet.
Both sides, Chinese side and Tibetan side, hardline attitude. Of course, Tibetan side, serious of devotion to the independence.
March 10, 1959, thousands and thousands of people came out into the streets protesting against the Chinese presence, which then created the large-scale people's uprising.
Many people are supposed to protect the Dalai Lama, but I believe, firstly, in non-violence. All my effort to cool down the situation failed.
And soon after, there was a bombardment by the Chinese.
So then, there's no other choice except escape.
Then the question was, how do you get out of this without being noticed? What His Holiness did was to disguise himself as a soldier. I can imagine those few moments when he's stepping out of his palace compound and pretending to be, one of the guards. And he left Lhasa and then began the long journey to India.
I think one really fearful night was the road by the river. Just other side of the river, Chinese military barracks. And we tried to minimize sound of the horse hoof. If they notice, if they open fire, finished. Then the next morning, the last moment to see Potala. My horse returned towards Potala, some kind of final goodbye, and a very heavy feeling. Age 24, I lost my own country.
Anyone could have told from his unruffled bearing, as he was greeted by high Indian officials, that the Dalai Lama had been in mortal danger since he left Lhasa, that he had been forced to leave his capital.
Because I become a refugee, so this new opportunity comes. If I still remain in Potala, in Lhasa, some people, you see, describe golden cage. Dalai Lama, holy Dalai Lama, remain like that. So I personally, you see, prefer the refugee life. It's more useful, more opportunity to learn, more experience.
Reframing, cognitive reframing is really a powerful technique to change your mindset. And in the Buddhist language, we call it outlook. And this is a fundamental insight in Buddhist psychology. That's why so much emphasis is placed in Buddhist psychology on changing the way you see the world. Instead of resentment and bitterness, reframing can help us, liberate us from that resentment and free us.
You see, if you look from one angle, you feel, oh, how bad, how sad. But if you look from another angle about that tragedy, that same event, that gives me some new opportunity to learn. And then there is a Tibetan saying, wherever you received much love, that's your home.
That's very beautiful.
Oh.
I mean, what you've said is quite wonderful. I think to add to it is that the thing is not how do you escape, it's how can I use this as something positive. And His Holiness has indicated that nothing, I think, can be more devastating in many ways than being turfed out of your own country. I mean, it's part of you. And by rights, His Holiness should be a sourpuss. I mean, he should be,
That's what
just do that face, leave your face as it is normal. Like you see, look like that. You look like you're real sourpuss. And then when you smile, your face lights up. And it is because in very large measure, you have transmuted what would have been totally negative. You have transmuted it into goodness. Because again, we have not said, well, how can I be happy? You've not said that. You've said, how can I help to spread compassion and love?
The idea of the dialogues was to explore the nature of joy in the face of adversity. But they also wanted us to bring in the science. They said this shouldn't be a Buddhist dialogue or a Christian dialogue. This should be about the nature of being human. And so they asked me to find out whether what they were saying was confirmed or contradicted by science. Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky at the University of California, Riverside has done some extraordinary studies on the science of happiness.
My lab and I started doing what we call happiness interventions. So they're basically like clinical trials, but instead of testing a new treatment, say for COVID, we're testing a happiness strategy. In one typical study, we found that people who did acts of kindness for others became happier and actually stayed happier for about 2 to 4 weeks after the study was over. And then people who did acts of kindness for themselves felt good while they were doing it, but that didn't change their happiness. So what really was important about kindness was that you're connecting with another person, and it might actually have effects on the body. So we collected blood, and we found that those who did acts of kindness for others showed changes in their RNA gene expression in the blood that were associated with a healthier immune profile. So it turns out that happiness isn't just something that feels good, it's not just about pleasure, but it's more than that. Happier people have more friends, they're also more productive at work, they're more creative, they're physically healthier, they have stronger immune systems, they even live longer.
So the best way to fulfill your own happy life, help others, make more friends. How to create friends? Trust. I mean, we have to take care ourselves. Without that, we cannot survive. We need that. But we should have wise selfish rather than foolish selfish. Foolish selfish means just think of yourself. Don't care about others' right. And then bully other, cheating other, exploiting other to gain something for you. That's foolish selfish. Taking care others' well-being, ultimately, best way to fulfill your own happy life or joyful life. So that's wise selfish, isn't it?
You're very good. You're wise. I wouldn't say wise selfish. You're wise. You don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm going to become a friend to the Dalai Lama. It just happens. I think it was a communication of the heart. Look at this. I mean, I thought you were non-violent.
The Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu have only actually been together half a dozen times. You know, global spiritual masters don't have a lot of time to hang out with their buddies.
That's great.
Think good thoughts. Think of me.
The Dalai Lama was invited to my dad's 80th birthday in Cape Town. The South African government at that time had an extensive trade relationships with China, and they delayed the process of issuing him a visa for weeks and weeks and weeks.
It's quite unbelievable, the discourtesy that they have shown to the Dalai Lama. I mean, Dalai Lama. I am warning you, one day we will start praying for the defeat of the ANC government.
For the African National Congress, for the ANC, to prevent the Dalai Lama from coming to South Africa and not giving him a visa was just a betrayal.
So we knew that the only way to get them together was to bring Arch to Dharamsala.
We just didn't know if his health would be strong enough.
My father had several recurrences of prostate cancer. And so there was, constant concerns and in and out of hospitals and all kinds of infections. So eventually all of the pieces fell into place. My father was so happy to finally see his dear friend again and to embark on a joint mission that spoke to their life's work, a mission of joy.
And some other leaders, you see, sometimes when we are meeting, you see, like statue, remain like this, very much seriously. So I'm thinking there's something very holy, formal sort of meeting. I wish something go wrong.
Now, people are going to know that the Dalai Lama comes into a room and he's looking around, maybe he's sitting with presidents or something. He hopes that the chair will break down.
So you describe me as a mischievous person.
He's doing very well. He's behaving like a human being.
What is the role of enjoyment and enjoying your life for you as a monastic? People may say, oh, he has renounced pleasure or enjoyment of his life.
Or sex.
What?
Sex.
Did you say that? You are a monk, remember?
Have you renounced pleasure and enjoyment? I sat next to you at lunch the other day. It looked like you were enjoying this wonderful food.
I love food. Food is the source survival of my body. Without food, you see, just thinking about compassion will not fulfill my stomach. But you see, we have to consume this meal not out of attachment, greed, only for survival of this body, which can think deeper values like that.
And one of the most fascinating things about that week together was that when we asked people to send us their questions, we got thousands of responses. They definitely were interested in the big questions of why we're here, the nature of life, and about mortality.
There's a question of how you think about your own deaths. How do you think about that possibility?
Quite polite. Quite polite.
Well, he doesn't mind too much because there's reincarnation.
Then certainly, my reincarnation, not very sure where I born, but you quite sure in heaven.
The Chinese say they are going to decide.
I want.
You must be nice to them. Yes. Well, I should say that for a very long time, the thought of my demise brought a great deal of anxiety. I've had a number of near-fatal illnesses. As a child, I had polio. And my father went off to buy the wood for making my coffin. And then in my teenage years, I developed TB. I was quite surprised after I said, God, if this is curtains for me, then it's okay. I have to admit that I was surprised at the calm and the peace that came over me. This is a fact of life. Death is a fact of life. Yes.
That's right. Yes. I think you rightly mentioned, sooner or later death comes. So, while you're alive, your life should be meaningful. I think maximum 100 years. That short period should not create more problem on this planet. Like that.
Good.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of shared background. Both of them are deeply spiritual people, and also both of them have deep history of struggle against authoritarian systems.
Bishop Desmond Tutu has become the leading voice in South Africa against that country's system of separation of the races, apartheid, under which the best housing, jobs, and education are reserved for the white minority and are denied to the 22 million blacks.
Apartheid really began in 1948, but separating black Africans from the white minority had long been a policy aim. Many had no right to citizenship and were regarded as aliens in major cities. Instead, they were made citizens of Bantustans, homelands scattered throughout South Africa.
I'm from one of the townships in South Africa, black townships, Squala region.
Archbishop, you were saying how His Holiness has experienced great suffering in his exile, but you too, in apartheid, and you and your people experienced great suffering. And even in your personal life, you've dealt with cancer, you're dealing with prostate cancer now. You've been able to maintain that joy in the face of that suffering. How have you been able to do it?
Well, I've certainly been helped by many other people. You open, you blossom, really because of other people. When I was about 9, my mother was working as a domestic worker at an institute for blind people. I recalled this white priest in a long flowing cassock doffing his hat to my mother. That struck me as being quite odd.
That was completely unheard of in the South Africa of the time. White man would not treat a black woman, and a washerwoman at that, as a person worthy of dignified respect. Trevor Huddleston was the superior of the Community of the Resurrection, which was an Anglican order of monks. Later, when my dad was hospitalized with tuberculosis, Trevor was a regular visitor, used to bring him magazines and comic books.
When you help someone who is less well off, when you are kind to someone else, you end up being joyful. But why? Because we realize that we are made for goodness.
I was the 4th child, and I remember being very young and having my dad teaching me to write. My parents had been teachers before the Bantu Education Act. Both of them left teaching in protest of that, and that was actually when my father went to study for ministry. Basically, what the apartheid government said was that there's no reason to educate black people beyond their station. So anything beyond what enables you to be a useful servant is more than you need to know.
The system tries to destroy us. It won't succeed. I want to tell you, it won't succeed.
Police in South Africa arrested Archbishop Desmond Tutu and several other church leaders during a protest demonstration. Meanwhile, in South Africa, police continue to use their emergency powers to stifle anti-government opposition.
I remember it as a moment when you realized that black life was cheap.
Tutu reiterated a commitment to nonviolence, but added it's very important when talking about violence to note that the primary violence in South Africa is the violence of apartheid.
There were 19 coffins of those shot by police while marching to another funeral 3 weeks ago. Someone is killed almost every day in clashes with the police. And reflected by what was today the greatest gathering of black grief and protest in this country ever, the passions aroused in recent months seem, if anything, more intense.
The crowd thought this man was a police informer. He would have died here, kicked to death. But Bishop Tutu saved his life, rushing from his car and pleading with the crowd to leave him alone. They would have listened to no one else.
We're on the edge of a precipice. We were fortunate. Our country did not go up in flames.
Arch became one of the central figures of the anti-apartheid struggle because so many of the political activists like Nelson Mandela were in jail or in exile. And it really became his ministry and his mission to explain to the world what was happening in South Africa.
People are peace-loving and have sought to bring about a change in that ghastly system by conventional, peaceful methods. And the reaction of the government has been police bullets, tear gas, detention, and death.
And he became public enemy number one.
Is there anyone here who says we will not be free?
He was ultimately significant in bringing down the apartheid regime.
You can, in fact, overcome some of the most horrendous circumstances and emerge on the other side not broken, with the eagerness to spread goodness and compassion in the world. I was thinking of Nelson Mandela. When he went to jail, he was young. He was the head of the armed wing of African National Congress.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people. And I think the time has come for us to continue.
He believed firmly that the enemy had to be decimated. That is the guy who went in. He goes on to Robben Island and is mistreated. They are made to dig in a quarry. They were sleeping on the floor, no mattress. He spent 27 years. And many would say, 27, oh, what a waste. No, that suffering in prison helped him to become more magnanimous, willing to listen to the other side, to see the people he regarded as enemy. You know, they too were human beings who had fears, expectations, and they had been molded by their society. It's like being put in a kind of fiery furnace to be refined. And in fact, in some ways, some suffering, maybe even intense suffering, is a necessary ingredient for developing compassion.
I think you have mentioned, I think very right. You see, suffering, problem, actually is the opportunity testing you.
Yes.
You see, some, you see, Tibetan, who spent many years in Chinese gulag, difficult, hard labor, really very, very immensely, you see, torture. He told me during those 18 years, difficult period, he facing some dangers. I thought danger may be on his life. Then I asked, what kind of danger? He told me, danger of losing compassion towards those Chinese perpetrators. So, I think Nelson Mandela's case, and your own case, and no matter how difficult it is, but you have certain inner strength because of this sort of spiritual sort of also the experience, the thinking. So that's something, I think something very useful, particularly when we're passing through difficulties. So this
So this shows the Tibetan saying is really true. And you know, the suffering is what makes you appreciate joy. Classical Buddhist education involves many years of rigorous academic training, a large part of which is actually in the format of a dialectical debate. You know, a concept needs to be always examined thoroughly. If it is not tested, it's like a sandcastle. With one finger below, the whole thing crumbles down. And His Holiness has a very sophisticated academic background. And this is one of the reasons why when he sits down with scientists and academics, you know, Western scholars, to engage in a deep conversation of any topic, they are surprised to see an intellect. They are fascinated by the way in which his mind works.
Since my childhood, I always have the curiosity. Whenever I see something come across, I always develop the question, why? That, if may I say so, that's the indication my brain is something good. Always thinking, investigate. So that, you see, brought me interest about science. Over 30 years, I developed more serious discussion with modern scientists.
I first met His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1992. He invited me to talk with him about the possibility of engaging in neuroscientific research with Tibetan monks, practitioners who have spent years training their mind. I began my career studying the disturbed mind. And when I met His Holiness for the first time, he challenged me in a very direct way, and he said, why can't you use the same tools of modern neuroscience that you've been using to study depression and anxiety and fear? Why can't you use those same tools to study kindness and to study compassion? When we first proposed this, most people looked at us like we were absolutely nuts. But here's the experiment. What we do is we bring people into the laboratory and we put a kind of metal plate that we strap onto a person's wrist. And through this plate, we can circulate water very, very rapidly, and we can regulate the temperature of the water. And I could tell you that this is damn hot. It feels like it's burning your skin. So we just give them one experience of this so that they know what we're talking about. They have the direct experience. Then we bring them into the formal experiment and they're in the MRI scanner. And we tell them we're going to give them 2 tones. When they hear one tone, which is a high-pitched tone, beep, then they know that in 10 seconds they're going to get zapped with this very painful stimulus. If they hear a low tone, boop, they know that they will just feel warm, but it won't be hot. Very simple. So we have people who've meditated and we have controls, people who've never meditated, their age and gender matched, and they go through this experiment. Now we know where in the brain the pain circuits reside, so we know exactly where to look. And when we look at those circuits in the non-meditating controls, the moment we present the high-pitched tone, beep, their brain responds as if it received the actual pain. So nothing's happened other than they got a tone, but their brains are responding as if they got the heat. When you do that with the meditators, they receive the tone, beep, nothing happens. There's absolutely no significant change in the pain matrix. They're flat. Then when the actual heat comes on, both groups respond. But then as soon as the pain goes off, the meditators come right back down to baseline, whereas the controls persist. Their pain circuits are still reverberating. It's as if they can't shut them off. They're ruminating about the pain. The conclusion that our work has led us to, very simply, but we think it's a very radical conclusion, and that is that well-being is a skill. Well-being can actually be learned, it can be nurtured, and it's a skill that can enable us to live a happier life. When human beings first evolved on this planet, none of us were brushing our teeth. This is a learned behavior. It's not part of our genome. And if we spent even the short amount of time that we spend every day brushing our teeth, nurturing our mind, this world would be a very different place.
You see, mentally, very, very helpful to keep a calm mind. So I think every people, you see, have this sort of same sort of potential capacity.
His Holiness and my dad are both people who have very strong disciplines of prayer and quiet time. When I went to seminary and was ordained, I had the experience of learning my dad's language in a way that allowed me to have a different quality of conversation with him. The most important lesson that I have taken is taking time for prayer and taking time for quiet. For him, that's the first priority, and everything else flows from that.
It's incredibly rare for anyone to be able to go to the inner sanctum of the Dalai Lama's meditation room.
It's his very private room where His Holiness spends most of his time, where all of his texts are.
You see these two statues, one statue.
And the seat is facing the altar, which contains a Kirongcho, the most sacred icon in the entire Tibetan Buddhist world.
The Dalai Lama is going to share one of his meditations with us, and he's like, okay, so every morning I start off with a death meditation.
There are different levels of consciousness. In the most subtle level, breathing cease, heart beating cease, brain also cease, no longer function.
You know, and I think about how my body and my identity will dissolve.
So that we call intimate state. Then rebirth, you see, at the time of real death, suppose I well equipped, but I don't know, not very sure.
We then had a Eucharist service. The Eucharist is a prayer of thanksgiving for the life of Christ and for Christ's life in us.
Blessed be God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
We share in the body and blood of Christ. And so typically we have bread and wine.
You see, Buddhist monk, do not take wine.
Well, I won't allow you to drive.
My father whispered in my ear, do I offer him the Eucharist? Do I not offer him the Eucharist?
Serving communion to non-Christians is controversial for some people.
I think where my father has landed is that it's God's table, it's not his table. And so whoever approaches the table with reverence comes at God's invitation.
His Holiness fully participated in this. It was a very powerful experience for me personally, because Archbishop led through the sacrament.
Glory to God in the highest, and peace to his people on earth.
In spite 80 years old, still I consider student.
Really?
Really. Every day learning.
Yes, you are wonderful.
I expect that kind of comment.
You won't keep him humble, though. I want to jump for a second to our next topic, which is about despair and hopelessness. According to the UN, 350 million people in our world suffer from depression. They no longer have hope. What do you say to people who come to this work where that sadness has become despair and hopelessness?
Sometimes the people completely lost their hope like that. The real, I think, inner spirit or warm-heartedness really makes differences.
Yes, but I think he is wanting to say, how do we help people who really want to be joyful, but who are holding on by the skin of their teeth? For me, when I have some anguish in my life, what keeps me going is that I am a prisoner of hope. But it's not something that just comes ready-made from heaven. We are human beings, fallible human beings. And His Holiness points out that, now, we see him so serene and calm. But there was a time when he too and His Holiness's serenity didn't come ready-made. It was through the practice of prayer, meditation, that the gentleness, the compassion grew. It's like muscles that have to be exercised in order for them to get their right tone and to be strengthened.
Growth. It takes time, minute by minute, day by day, month by month, year by year, decade by decade. Take time.
The Tibetan Children's Village is where children who have come as refugees from Tibet come to live. It's a sort of an orphanage, really. It's an orphanage, a school. One of the things that is happening in Tibet is the Chinese government is really trying to suppress Tibetan culture. Because of this, some parents who are in Tibet will send their children to the Tibetan Children's Village.
I was originally sent to Tibetan Children's Village when I was 4 years old. My first memory of meeting the Dalai Lama is probably when I was about 7 years old, 6 years old. This was at the Tibetan Children's Village in Shimla, northern India. And the entire school community was busy preparing, cleaning the roads and, drawing patterns on the ground at the traditional Tibetan style. And it turned out that I was one of the 2 children who was appointed to, walk beside him, holding his hand. One of the questions I asked him was, whether I can become a monk. So I don't know, there seemed to have been some karma.
First of all, I would like to say touch the lake. My name is Tenzin Siring. Now I'm going to share how I escaped from Tibet.
I'm Tenzin Doma of class 12. I was born in a small village called Kansi in Kham province in Tibet. I came from Tibet when I was 5 years old and in 2002.
It was a great loss for me, not being with my family, especially my mother.
My journey is very difficult because we crossed the Mount Kailash and many rivers.
We had to hide from the Chinese police, so my grandmother hid me among the luggage or under the seat of the bus.
His Holiness, Desmond Tutu. I was only 5 and I had to leave my family behind. The pain I went through, leaving my family.
Sorry.
That was really an aching moment, an aching encounter.
Now you should think at present you've got complete freedom and have the opportunity to study not only modern education but also, you see, study, learning our ancient 1,000-year-old rich culture. So look that way, you feel okay.
And His Holiness always is aware that there is a kind of expectation on his part to be the rock, to be the anchor, you know, for every Tibetan. So I think that, so it's sort of on his part, it was more of a not so much giving comfort per se, but giving courage. Whereas Archbishop's immediate response was to give comfort.
Feelings. We have no control over our feelings. When it is painful, it is painful, you know, and you have to acknowledge that it is painful.
The problem is all these emotions you consider as a part of our mind, as something normal. I think that's a mistake. Once we realize, like anger or envy or these, as harmful, firstly destroy my peace of mind. That constantly come, even destroy my health. Too much sort of these negative emotions create more trouble among our own family or among our own community or among friends like that. So that's, I think, important.
Yes, but I think we ought not to make people feel guilty. Emotions are spontaneous things that arise.
I think important is any emotion which brings some peace of mind, and any sort of emotion which disturbs that's important to realize that. Once we recognize that, these negative emotion, you have some kind of distance.
The Dalai Lama was saying, if we do our spiritual practices, if we take the time to cultivate ourselves, we can prevent ourselves from falling into fear, anger, and sadness. But as Arch said, inevitably, at some points we are, because we're human.
I would say to everyone, you are made for perfection. You are made for perfection. You are not yet perfect. You are a masterpiece in the making. There's a concept that we have in South Africa, the concept of Ubuntu, where it says a person is a person through other persons. I mean, I could not speak as I'm speaking without having learned it from other human beings. I could not think as a human being except through learning it from other human beings. We belong in this delicate network. You know, I mean, when you think of Doctors Without Borders, Why do they go there? I mean, they could stay in France or wherever and have a wonderful practice. But they don't. They go off to some of the most poverty-stricken places. Those doctors and nurses, people going into a hugely dangerous situation. You know, the outpouring of love and compassion and caring by people you don't know them from Adam, and people just give and give, because that's actually who we really are.
Yes, I agree. Basic human nature is goodness. People who seeing newspaper too much believe that, only that, the one only event on this planet, then feel more hopelessness and feel, oh, humanity is bad and our future not much hope. Yes, there are very sad things, very negative things, but at the same time there are much more positive things. Then, okay, feel.
Yes, it's how we are made. We're wired to be compassionate. We're wired to be caring for the other. If you live out Ubuntu, Ubuntu says we can be human only together.
It's no surprise that when the essence of their wisdom is distilled, the key to joy is to get in touch with your own natural compassion and live from there. Find a way to live from there.
At the end of the apartheid era, many people didn't know how their loved ones had died, where their loved ones were buried, knew nothing of the ends of their loved ones' lives.
This is an opportunity to put the past behind you.
The liberation movement wanted to have Nuremberg-style trials for those who had been the perpetrators of the worst of the human rights violations under apartheid. The apartheid government wanted amnesty for all of those who had been perpetrators. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was something of a compromise. In exchange for telling the truth of their actions, people would be immune from prosecution.
There's one thing that I will have to live till the day I die. It's the corpses that I will have to drag with me to my grave of the people whom I've killed.
Forgiveness meant I'm wiping the slate clean so that we can work together for a better tomorrow, a different narrative of who we are as a South African community. And my father was invited to chair the commission.
We are charged to unearth the truth about our dark past, to lay the ghost of that past so that they will not return to haunt us, and that we will thereby contribute to the healing of a traumatized and wounded people.
When you shot this man, what did you see? I shot him on the side of his head.
Captain Rian Bellingen was accompanied by this colleague, Constable Tapelo Mbelo.
A man approached us raising his arms. One sergeant from the riot unit, he was a white sergeant, said, I should shoot this man. I shot him whilst he was lying on his back.
We had mothers of some young people who were killed. One man who betrayed these young people appeared in front of these mothers and asked for their forgiveness. And one of the mothers said, "My child, we forgive you." There is an incredible kind of nobility and strength. We have the potential to be instruments of incredible compassion and forgiveness.
But forgiveness does not mean forget. You should keep memory about their sort of negative thing. But because of that, there is possibility to develop anger or hatred. That control, that's meaning of forgiveness. So it is totally wrong. The practice of tolerance and practice of forgiveness is signs of weakness. Totally wrong. 100% wrong. Or 1,000% wrong. Isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes, I was just going to say, those who say forgiving is a sign of weakness haven't tried it.
But often the people that we have the hardest time forgiving are the people who are closest to us.
Yes, yes.
My father's father was the headmaster of the school across the street from their home. My grandfather was wonderful, fun, bright, and all of those positive attributes. But when he got drunk, he became violent and abusive.
My mother, she was just such a very gentle person, an incredible human being. And that just made it, I think, worse. I used to get so angry. If I'd been bigger, I would wallop him. I was very angry with myself for being too small to intervene when she was being roughed up.
If he were here looking at you, what would you say to him?
I would certainly tell him I was deeply hurt by how he treated my mother. One great regret I have is when my father said he wanted to talk to me. There was something he wanted to tell me, and I was too tired, and I said, "No, well, we'll talk. Can we talk tomorrow?" It sometimes happens only in novels. We were awakened early in the morning by someone telling us that my father died the previous evening. And so I've never known what it was he wanted to tell me. I hope it was that maybe he had a premonition of his death and wanted to say how sorry he was for the treatment that he had meted out to my mother. And so I regret that, and it is a burden on my heart and my spirit, and I can only hope that he will have forgiven me.
We went to the Tibetan children's village for the birthday party.
We wanted to throw a little surprise party for the Dalai Lama. Ended up having 2,500 people.
As we arrived, of course, there were literally over 1,000 students, all wearing their Tibetan school uniforms.
I just remember being struck by the quality of attention that the children gave.
We are now going to have a brief question and answer session.
Your Holiness, can joy be the ultimate means for world peace? Thank you.
The genuine sort of joyfulness is, you see, helping other. You get more satisfaction. To build happy society, peaceful society, firstly, peaceful family. In order to create a peaceful family, firstly, individual person, himself or herself, should create inner peace, joyfulness, then share with the family members. That through that way, 1 family, 10 family, 100 family, that way change or bring happier society, happier community. Through that way, eventually national level, then humanities level, 7 billion human beings. We all same desire, same right to achieve happy life. Okay.
Thank you. 1122, how can we achieve true joy and happiness?
Joy is the reward, really, of seeking to give joy to others. When you are caring, compassionate, more concerned about the welfare of others and of your own, you suddenly feel a warm glow in your heart because you have, in fact, wiped the tears from the eyes of another.
Thank you.
Arch is dancing with this fantastic sway, and he's so cool. And, you know, the Dalai Lama is standing there, kind of nervous.
Now, to be frank, monastics members are not supposed to dance. It's actually one of the precepts. No singing and no dancing. He was able to persuade His Holiness to stand up and at least do some moves.
The whole week went from being about gathering wisdom to just getting to witness them enjoy each other and crack a lot of jokes.
Wait.
think my last question for you both is, I think you might be excited, but everybody else is sorry to see this incredible conversation come to a close. The last question is about the joy in your friendship. And I'm wondering, what is it about your friendship with each other that allows you to have this kind of extraordinary joy?
He's always troubling me. I admire him enormously. Oh, he's going to get proud. I'm just saying, he is there for us as a beacon. And maybe the Chinese, without intending it, have given the world a wonderful gift.
Thank you.
Pay me. Pay me. Pay me.
I will pay. I will pay just a few nice words.
Yes.
Firstly, I always look at the people, human level. So I do not sort of consider importance of their rank or position. I always look human level. So on human level, this person, very nice, humble, I think, very, I think, joyful. And then once become close friend, that friendship never change. Then secondly, this person, funny person. I love that.
You are mischievous.
So I really love, you see, he always teasing me, and also I tease him. You see, so we really become something quite special.
Yes.
So, and also his face is, you see, the head looks like a monk now. You see, this picture, special picture, I think at time of my death, I will remember you.
Thank you.
So perhaps, according to your sort of tradition, we may meet in heaven in the presence of God. You, as a Christian good practitioner, you go first. You may sort of also helping me bring together.
Thank you.
And from the Buddhist viewpoint, once you see develop some special sort of close connections, then that sort of impact will carry life after life.
Our best friendships are friendships that are really based in profound respect for one another. It grows us in ways that we don't necessarily choose to grow.
At the fundamental level, every single human being is exactly the same, vulnerable to pain, fear, unhappiness, and aspiring to be happy, to seek connection, to find meaning, to find love. There is no difference. It doesn't really matter where you come from. That is the fundamental human condition. And compassion speaks to that reality of who we are.
I think there's nothing more profound than recognizing the joy that is at the heart of our shared humanity. And that all the fear and the anger and the sadness that consumes so much of our life is actually to get us back to that joy, to get us back to one another. And I think the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu's message is that we can reconnect to our humanity and to one another's humanity. And that is where we find joy and happiness that we can access at any time.
Share the joy. Are you in?
We can be forever free, live a life in harmony, you and me forever. Love is what I'm talking about, forever. Oh yeah. Sing about the joy now. You gotta let that joy become joy for you, joy for me. Living life so joyfully. Joy for you, joy for me. Living life so joyfully. Joy for you, joy for me. Living life so joyfully. I'm living life so joyful. Let's celebrate together. Come, let's celebrate together. I'm talking joy, compassion, joy, compassion. Love is what I'm talking about, you know. Touch the sky, fly. Joy for you, joy for me. Living life so joyfully. Joy for you, joy for me. Living life so joyfully. Joy for you, joy for me. Living life so joyfully. Living life so joyful. Start today in every way. Start today. You know what I'm about to say. Sing like that joy in every way. That joy was ever free. Let's celebrate in harmony. Let's celebrate together. Joy, joy, joy.
Like that.